Hey guys, tonight we head out across an endless sweep of sand, where the stars wheel above you like lanterns pinned to a canvas, and the desert is as silent as the inside of a library at midnight. You're about to join the Tuareg salt caravans, the so-called blue men of the desert, named for the indigo dye that rubs onto their skin from their veils. You'll ride alongside camels that creak like overstuffed furniture, hauling slabs of salt across dunes that look identical for days. You probably wouldn't last an afternoon here without shade or water, but for the Tuareg, it was simply Tuesday. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time down below. It's always fascinating to see this sleepy caravan stretch across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, grains of sand slipping beneath your sandals. The desert feels like it has swallowed the horizon. Every footstep has the texture of crunching sugar, and every breath seems stolen from a dry oven. The Tuareg guides walk ahead, tall and unhurried, their faces veiled in indigo cloth. The dye stains their cheeks like faint shadows. They speak little when they do. Their words are half swallowed by the wind. The camels shuffle behind, groaning, their padded feet spreading softly across the dunes. Each beast carries slabs of salt, pale blocks cut from distant mines, lashed together with ropes that creak in rhythm. Salt wasn't just seasoning here, it was currency. A block could be worth its weight in gold, depending on the century and the market. Historians still argue whether the salt trade mattered more than gold itself in West African economies. Either way, salt was life you could die without it, and thrive with it. You imagine yourself climbing onto one of those camels. The saddle is hard wood, covered with worn leather. As you sway left and right, the desert stretches endlessly in ripples of sand. The heat presses down during the day, but now it is night, and the air feels strangely sharp, as if the stars themselves are exhaling. You hear the desert human almost inaudible sound, like the sand singing when the wind brushes it. Some swear it is the spirits of the dunes. The Tuareg set camp after hours of trudging. They do it almost without words, pulling stakes from bundles, stretching tents that look like folded wings. A fire is coaxed to life with a patience that only people who live in scarcity understand. Tea is brewed, always tea. They pour it from a silver pot into small glasses, then back again, raising the pot as high as their arms allow, letting the stream froth like desert foam. It's both a ritual and an art. The first glass, they say, is bitter as life. The second, strong as love. The third, sweet as death. You chuckle softly, realizing that even bedtime stories in the desert can't resist a little drama. You sip your own imaginary glass. It is hot, too hot, but somehow soothing. Around you, the camels fold down into the sand, tucking their long legs under their bellies. They make sighing noises that sound suspiciously like complaints. Someone jokes that camels were invented solely to practice grumbling. You believe it. Salt slabs are stacked in neat piles, covered against dew. A young herder leans against them, fiddling with a reed flute. The notes drift into the night, high and thin, carried by the wind like threads. They mingle with the crackle of the fire, the distant bark of a desert fox, and the occasional cough of a camel that clearly thinks it deserves better wages. You lie back, staring at the sky. There are so many stars you almost feel dizzy. The Milky Way runs like spilled sugar across black velvet. The Tuareg navigate by these stars, their routes memorized like poems. Every bright point has a name, and the men recite them as calmly as you might recite subway stops. You realize your modern phone's GPS is laughably fragile compared to this living knowledge. The desert is full of sounds if you listen closely. The wind slides over dunes, low and endless. Sand trickles like liquid when a footstep shifts it. The fire pops. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena laughs at its own joke. You pull your cloak tighter, realizing the desert is not hot at night, but sharp, almost cold. The air seems to scrape your throat when you breathe. Stories begin. An elder clears his throat and talks about the first caravan his grandfather joined, when a sandstorm swallowed the sky for 3 days. They tied ropes between camels and walked blind, trusting only the tug of the beast ahead. He laughs softly, saying that the camels knew the desert better than the men. Another story tells of wells that vanish here 1 year, gone the next. Some say they sink into the sand. Others claim jinn spirits hide them out of mischief. Historians still debate whether some of these tales reflect actual climate shifts or just campfire exaggeration. Either way, they're more fun than meteorological charts. You shift again on the hard ground. The night is long, but the caravan will rise before dawn. The Tuareg believe in moving during the cool hours, resting through the furnace of midday and pushing on as the sun lowers again. You almost envy their rhythm, slow, steady, unhurried, tuned to survival rather than productivity. No emails here, no meetings, just sand, salt, tea, and stars. Your eyes grow heavy. The fire burns lower. Shadows stretch across the sand, their edges blurred. You hear another pour of tea, the metallic clink of glass, the sigh of a camel, and somewhere, impossibly far, the ripple of wind across dunes. The caravan waits for dawn, and you, somewhere in between dream and waking, wait with it. You stir awake as the faintest hint of light brushes the horizon. Dawn in the Yoruba marketplace doesn't explode like fireworks. It stretches, yawns, and creeps in with the color of warm clay and slow smoke. You rub the sleep from your eyes, step onto the packed earth, and already you can hear it. The murmur of voices, the clink of cowrie shells, and the bleat of a goat that very clearly does not want to be sold today. The market is alive, though in its own gentle rhythm. You shuffle forward between stalls, each one laid out with careful pride. Cola nuts are stacked in little pyramids, crimson and glossy, like edible jewels. They're chewed not just for flavor, but to keep one awake during long meetings, journeys, or ceremonies. You pop one in your mouth in your imagination, wincing at the bitterness. It's about as pleasant as licking a chalkboard, but at least it keeps you alert. A woman in bright indigo cloth calls out, praising the quality of her palm oil. Her voice is smooth, practiced, rising above the chatter. Another trader counters with cassava roots piled high, dust clinging to their coarse skins. The smells are heavy and mingled: smoked fish, shea butter, fermented beans. You pinch your nose discreetly, then laugh to yourself. Modern supermarkets might be easier, but they're certainly less interesting. You pass a row of men hunched over strings of cowries. The shells rattle softly as they count. These shells are currency, carried in bags, strung together, traded for goats or baskets of millet. Historians still argue whether cowries spread across West Africa mainly through trade with the Indian Ocean, or if local circulation built up gradually. Either way, here they clink like coins in a half-asleep cash register. Your stomach growls as a vendor stirs a pot of Acara-fried bean cakes, sizzling golden in palm oil. The smell is both earthy and inviting. You imagine reaching out, too hot to hold, blowing softly before biting into the crisp crust. Delicious, and definitely more appealing than that cola nut. Beside her, another vendor roasts plantains on coals, their skins blackened, their flesh meltingly sweet. You take a bite in your mind, and for a moment, the whole market seems designed to lull you with flavors. The crowd grows. Women balance trays on their heads, steady as if they were born with them. Pots, gourds, even chickens ride up there, clucking indignantly. Children dart between legs, carrying smaller baskets, or just chasing each other in the dust. A drummer taps a slow rhythm nearby, not to entertain, but simply because rhythm seems to belong to everything here. You overhear two traders bargaining over a goat. The seller insists the animal is strong enough to pull a cart, though the goat in question looks like it might faint from the heat. The buyer shakes his head, counters with a handful of cowries, then adds a few more with theatrical sighs. Finally, they agree, slap hands, and the goat sighs too as if resigned to its fate. You chuckle, realizing some parts of human commerce never change. One quirky sight makes you pause. A stall with charms, cowrie shells strung with feathers, bottles filled with river water, tiny gourds sealed with wax. These are not just trinkets, but protective talismans sold alongside food. A customer whispers with the seller, choosing carefully, as though picking a charm is as serious as choosing a spouse. The sun rises higher, casting gold across the thatched roofs of stalls. The air grows warmer, heavy. A breeze stirs dust, lifting the scent of pepper and wood smoke. You wipe sweat from your forehead, though the locals don't seem to notice. This is their world. Bright wrappers rustling, laughter rising, the constant clatter of cowries. One elder begins telling a story loudly enough for nearby buyers to hear. He claims the first cola nut was discovered by a hunter who followed a talking parrot deep into the forest. Some nod, others laugh, and you can't help but smile. Historians still debate whether such myths were metaphor or memory, but you enjoy them best as bedtime anecdotes, half fact, half dream. As the market bustles, you wander further. You glimpse cloth dyed in deep indigo, patterns beaten into it with wooden stamps. You run your fingers over it in your imagination, smooth and cool. Nearby, a row of gourds filled with palm wine line a stall. Someone uncorks one, the faint fizz rising, and you imagine the taste sweet, sharp, a little like fermented honey. A child approaches, offering a carved wooden spoon. You buy it for a few cowries? Why not? The child beams, clutching the shells, darting back to her mother. The spoon feels heavy in your hand, carved with swirling designs. You tuck it into your bag, a quiet reminder that even in a boring history for sleep, you can leave with souvenirs. The drums quicken, echoing through the stalls. The sun is climbing, heat thickening. Traders fan themselves with woven mats, but business continues. It will last until the sun is nearly overhead, then slow as people retreat to shade. You take one last look. The bright cloth, the bouncing trays, the clink of shells, the aroma of roasted plantains. The Yoruba market hums with life, yet its rhythm is soothing, measured, unhurried, steady as a heartbeat. You step away, carrying the memory of kola nut bitterness and akara sweetness, the cowrie clatter, and the goat's complaint. The market fades behind you, but its gentle buzz lingers, like the aftertaste of tea in the desert. You drift from the dusty hum of the market to a place where the air hangs thick with river mist. The Mekong sprawls before you, wide and brown, swollen with silt and secrets. You stand at the bank as the dawn light folds over the water, catching the slow drift of barges laden with rice. The current tugs at your toes as if it wants to pull you in, to join its endless journey through mountains, fields, and delta. You climb aboard a wooden barge, its planks creaking, the smell of damp bamboo clinging to everything. A man at the stern pulls the boat forward, muscles taut against the current. His movements are deliberate, unhurried, like someone who has learned that the river's pace cannot be rushed. You sink down, legs folded, and watch the water ripple against the hull. On either bank, Khmer rice terraces rise in soft, green steps. They shimmer under the early light, the paddies filled with water that mirrors the sky. You hear the croak of frogs, the whine of insects, the low call of farmers as they bend over seedlings. Each motion is repetitive, hypnotic. For them, rice is not just food, but rhythm itself. Their days marked by planting, tending, harvesting, year after year. You imagine pressing your bare feet into the flooded fields. Mud squeezes between your toes, warm and squelching. Tiny fish dart away, startled by your intrusion. The farmers laugh at you good-naturedly, their straw hats shading faces browned by sun. A woman straightens her back, sighs, and jokes that even gods would get tired of this work. Everyone chuckles, the sound carried away on the wind. Rice, you realize, is civilization. Historians still argue whether Khmer irrigation systems were the most advanced of their era, or whether they borrowed heavily from neighbors. But as you sit here, it doesn't matter because the evidence is right in front of you. Endless terraces, carved into hillsides, fed by clever canals that breathe life into the land. Your barge glides past a cluster of stilt houses, their wooden legs sunk deep into the water. Children wave from ladders, dangling their feet into the river, splashing each other as if this wide brown artery were simply a backyard pool. Smoke curls from the thatched roofs, carrying the scent of grilled fish. Someone beats laundry against a flat stone, each slap a metronome for the morning. You hear bells soft, distant. A temple rises from the bank, its roof edged in curling ornaments. Monks in saffron robes move slowly, bowls in hand, receiving rice offerings. They walk barefoot, heads bowed, silent. A farmer presses sticky rice into a bowl, bows low. The monk smiles faintly, though his silence speaks more than words. As the barge drifts, you notice floating shrines tethered to the bank's small bamboo rafts, carrying candles, flowers, and incense. They bob gently, offerings to river spirits. Some say these spirits can be playful, overturning boats or hiding fish. Others say they are guardians, keeping balance. Historians still debate whether such rituals are older than Hindu influence or shaped later by Buddhism. Either way, the smoke curls skyward, fragrant and steady, as if the spirits themselves breathe it in. You lean back, half dozing as the barge sways. The river sings. Frogs croak in harmony, birds call overhead, and the splash of oars folds into the rhythm. A dragonfly lands on your knee, its wings catching the light like colored glass. You hold your breath, unwilling to scare it. The boatman suddenly grins and points at something in the water. A massive fish leaps, scales flashing silver, before it crashes back into the river with a splash that douses your face. You gasp, laugh, and wipe your cheeks. He shrugs as if to say, "That's the Mekong for you." The sun rises higher, warming your back. Farmers on the banks work steadily, their reflections rippling in water that looks like liquid bronze. Buffalo wade in, their horns jutting like half-submerged roots. They flick their ears lazily, swishing tails against flies. One snorts, as if unimpressed by the majesty of it all. You smile. Even buffalo seem to think history is boring sometimes. A woman aboard the barge hands you a wrapped bundle of sticky rice. You peel back the banana leaf. The rice is warm, sweetened with coconut and sprinkled with sesame seeds. You take a bite, the flavor simple yet comforting. In your mind, it lingers like the hum of the river itself. Nothing dramatic, nothing exotic, just nourishing and steady. Clouds gather briefly, shading the terraces in muted tones. The wind shifts, cool against your face. You imagine lying down right here on the planks, letting the rocking lull you into sleep. Around you, life goes on. Farmers plant seedlings, monks collect offerings, children splash in the water, buffalo grunt. The barge drifts on, unhurried, and you, lulled by the rhythm of poles and water and the endless green of terraces, drift too. The river slips away behind you, and with it, the green hush of terraces. Now you find yourself crouched on a dusty coastal plain, where the air smells faintly of smoke and salt. The sound that greets you isn't rushing water or market chatter. It's the hollow thump of a mallet against clay. You've wandered into the world of the mochi, an ancient culture along Peru's desert coast, and their pottery workshops flicker with life as the sun dips low. A row of kilns glows faint orange in the dusk. They look almost like oversized beehives, squatting on the ground, their mouths exhaling thin streams of smoke. You feel the heat radiating as you step closer, the warmth pressing against your skin, the smell sharp with baked earth. Inside, flames curl around rows of vessels, jars, cups, and bottles shaped with astonishing precision. The potters work calmly, as though their hands were born to coax clay into form. You pick up a damp vessel, still soft. Your fingertips leave as faint imprints. A potter grins and shakes his head, as if to warn you not to ruin his work. The clay is smooth and cool, gathered from riverbanks and kneaded with sand. You imagine squatting beside him, rolling coils, smoothing seams, and realizing that pottery is not glamorous, just endless patience. It's like kneading bread, but instead of dinner, you end up with a jar. The mochi were famous for their portrait vessels, human faces captured in clay with a realism that feels almost unsettling. You see one on a nearby shelf, brows furrowed, cheeks hollow, lips pressed as if in mid-thought. It's so lifelike you almost expect it to whisper gossip. Historians still argue whether these vessels depicted real individuals or idealized figures. Either way, they're strangely intimate, like shaking hands across centuries. Nearby, another potter shapes a stirrup spout bottle, 2 spouts joined into one handle. He runs his thumb along the curve, smoothing it into perfection. The design isn't just aesthetic. It slows evaporation, preserving liquids in Peru's dry climate. A small, practical detail, and yet it ends up in museums half a world away. You chuckle imagine designing the ancient equivalent of a water bottle, only to have future scholars treat it like the crown jewels. As night settles, stories ripple through the workshop. One elder leans back, wiping clay from his palms, and tells a tale of the moon goddess who protected potters. He says if the kiln fires evenly, she smiles. If the vessel cracks, she's displeased. Another man rolls his eyes, muttering that cracked pots happen when apprentices forget to temper clay. You grin clearly, even in antiquity, science and superstition lived side by side. The younger apprentices stoke the fire. Sparks leap into the air, vanishing into the purple dusk. The flames roar briefly, then settle into steady breath. The kilns glow, warm beacons against the desert night. You find yourself entranced, staring into their mouths, hypnotized by the dance of fire over pottery. The air fills with mixed sounds, the hiss of burning wood, the low hum of conversation, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere in the village. A child giggles, playing with a lump of discarded clay, shaping it into something vaguely resembling a llama. You smile. It's the ancient equivalent of doodling in the margins. The heat grows intense. Sweat beads on your forehead. You step back into the cooler air, breathing in relief. The village stretches out, houses of adobe clustered together, each one glowing faintly with firelight. Beyond, the desert looms vast, empty, a silence that presses against the ears. You realize how precarious life feels here, wedged between desert and ocean, yet sustained by skill and tradition. A potter hands you a finished vessel, warm from the kiln, its surface gleaming with reddish slip. You run your fingers over the smooth curve, surprised at its lightness. He nods as if to say, "Now you understand." You cradle it carefully, feeling a quiet connection, an object shaped by hands long dead, yet still humming with purpose. The night deepens. Shadows stretch across the workshop. Flames flicker lower, crackling softly. The potters rest on low stools, sipping a fermented drink chicha, made from maize. Its sour, fizzy scent carries in the breeze. They laugh gently, toasting the fire, the moon goddess, and perhaps their own tired arms. You sit back, sipping your own imaginary gourd of chicha. It is tart, earthy, not unpleasant. The warmth of it spreads through you, mixing with the glow of the kilns. The desert wind cools your skin. The conversation fades into a lull. The fire hisses quietly, and the stars appear one by one. You glance again at the portrait vessel on the shelf. Its eyes seem to follow you, calm and knowing, as if sharing in the hush of the night. You lie down on the sand, the vessel watching, the kiln sighing, the moon climbing higher. Sleep tugs at your eyelids, gentle as clay under a potter's hands. You wake with the faint taste of chicha still lingering, and when you blink, the sand and kilns are gone. Instead, you find yourself walking along a damp quay, the air cool and briny. Heavy clouds brood overhead, and gulls wheel lazily, their cries echoing against thick stone walls. You've wandered into a Hanseatic port, one of those bustling medieval hubs where merchants stored barrels of herring, grain, and wool, waiting for ships that creaked against the tide. The warehouses loom like tired giants, massive stone and timber structures, their beams dark with centuries of salt air. You run your fingers along the rough wood, each groove carved by time and trade. A door yawns open, and you step inside. The air smells of fish, tar, and damp rope. Barrels line the walls in neat rows, stacked higher than your head. Each one is marked with chalk letters and symbols you can't quite read, but which tell merchants exactly what lies within. A clerk sits at a wooden table near the entrance, scratching into a ledger with a quill. The scratching is sharp, deliberate, and oddly soothing-like, the rhythm of a cricket at night. He barely looks up as you pass, though you catch him muttering about weights, measures, and debts owed by some fellow in Lübeck. You smile. Paperwork, it seems, is eternal. The workers move slowly, shoulders bent under sacks of rye. The air is filled with the soft thump of boots on wooden planks, the groan of barrels rolled across the floor. Someone shouts, though not angrily, just part of the rhythm. You pause to help steady a barrel, though you nearly topple with it. A worker laughs, claps you on the shoulder, and mutters something in low German that you're pretty sure translates to, "Stick to storytelling." The Hanseatic League bound together ports across the Baltic and North Seas, Lübeck, Hamburg, Bergen, Novgorod, trading everything from herring to furs. Historians still argue whether it was more like a guild, a cartel, or a miniature empire. You simply know it feels like standing in the middle of a giant spider web, every strand humming with commerce. Outside, the quay bustles. Ships rock against the tide, their sails furled, masts groaning like restless trees. Men haul ropes, patch sails, and argue over cargo tallies. The air rings with hammering as shipwrights patch a hull, the clang echoing like distant bells. You inhale deeply. Tar, pitch, salt, and fish a cocktail no candle company will ever sell. In a corner, you notice a small stall where women sell warm rolls, fresh from an oven. The scent cuts through the fishy air like a gift. You buy one in your imagination, tearing it open to reveal soft crumb, steam rising. You bite, and for a moment, the Hanseatic world feels less about ledgers and more about comfort. Nearby, boys chase each other across the quay, dodging barrels and shouting. One stumbles, lands flat, and laughs so hard he forgets to stand. A dock worker scolds them, though his grin gives him away. Even here, amid the grind of trade, life insists on being ordinary, even playful. You step back inside the warehouse as the tide rises. Water slaps against stone foundations. Torches flicker along the walls, their smoke curling up into beams. Workers sit for a brief rest, sharing salted fish and coarse bread. One man jokes that if he eats herring one more day, he'll sprout gills. Another replies that at least gills would save him from paying for beer. They all laugh, weary but genuine. You glance at the ledger again, its neat columns. The clerk dips his quill, sighs, and scribbles on. Ink stains his fingers. His eyes droop with fatigue. He mutters something about a missing barrel. Somewhere, a rat squeaks. You realize even the mighty Hanseatic League had to deal with vermin both rodent and human. As evening sets in, bells toll across the port. Workers roll the last barrels into corners, covering them with canvas. The air cools, heavy with mist. Lanterns are lit, glowing orange against stone and water. You feel the hush of transition, the day closing, the night preparing. Ships creak more loudly, as if restless in their sleep. The warehouse empties slowly. A few men linger, telling tales of storms in the North Sea. One swears he saw a sea serpent longer than the ship itself. Another scoffs, claiming it was just a log. Historians still debate whether such stories were outright invention or distorted memories of whales. You shrug either way, it makes for good bedtime material. You lean against a barrel, the wood solid under your back. The air is filled with the faint crackle of lanterns, the distant flap of sails, and the low murmur of voices fading into the mist. You close your eyes, listening to the port breathe. It is steady, unhurried, as though even commerce takes a nap once the stars come out. Sleep tugs at you again. The ledger closes with a soft thump. The last torch burns lower, and the key hums with the rhythm of tide and timber. Somewhere, gulls settle onto rooftops, their cries soften to whispers, and you, wrapped in salt air and the sigh of barrels, drift into the quiet heart of the Hanseatic night. You open your eyes, expecting to see misty docks, but instead a warm flicker greets you. Temple lamps sway gently in the night air, casting circles of gold across stone floors. You've stepped into the glow of ancient Greek hearths, where Hestia, goddess of the home, was worshipped not in grand temples, but in quiet flames that never went out. The fire before you is small, steady, almost shy. It pops softly, the scent of olive wood drifting upward. Around it, the room is plain, clay walls, simple benches, woven mats. Yet everything seems to orbit this flame, as though the world begins and ends in its glow. A woman ladles soup from a bronze pot, the steam rising fragrant with lentils and herbs. You breathe it in, earthy, comforting, utterly ordinary, and yet sacred. In every Greek household, Hestia's fire was tended daily. You imagine yourself crouching, adding a stick, careful not to let it die. If the flame went out, it was an omen of misfortune. Historians still argue whether families truly kept it burning nonstop, or simply rekindled it each morning from the city's central hearth. Either way, the symbolism mattered. As long as the fire lived, the household lived. Children shuffle in, rubbing their eyes, clutching small loaves of bread. They sit cross-legged by the fire, chewing slowly, soot smudging their cheeks. Their mother hums softly, rocking a baby with one arm while stirring soup with the other. You notice her expression, not pious awe, just the calm of routine. For her, worship and housework blur into one. The room darkens further as the lamp oil burns low. Shadows leap across the walls, dancing with the flames. You think of how many stories were told in this glow. Myths of gods, local gossip, maybe even the embarrassing tale of a neighbor who tripped over his own sandals at market. You smile. It's not all Homeric epics. Sometimes it's just Homer snoring too loudly. Outside, temple bells chime faintly. You step beyond the doorway into a small shrine, a public hearth tended by priests. Its flame, too, burns steadily, watched over like a heartbeat. Women arrive with offerings, small cakes of barley, a splash of wine. They bow, murmur thanks for safety, food, and warmth. Nothing dramatic, no grand sacrifices, just gratitude woven into daily ritual. A priest greets you with a nod. His robe smells faintly of smoke. He explains that Hestia never left Olympus for adventures like the other gods. No scandals, no battles, no betrayals, just the endless tending of the hearth. You can't help but laugh softly. Of course, the most important goddess for sleep storytelling is the one who never bothered with drama. You step closer to the shrine, the warmth kissing your face. You imagine tracing the carved symbols on the stone. Spirals, flames, little vessels. The priest mutters that travelers often take a spark from this sacred fire when founding new colonies, carrying Hestia's blessing across seas. Historians still debate how widespread the practice was. But you like the image, a flicker of flame, carried in clay, lighting the first nights of new cities. As the night deepens, the fire softens to embers. Families gather, telling myths of Hestia's siblings, Zeus the thunderer, Hera the jealous, Poseidon the restless, and in the middle, Hestia, quiet as always, keeping the flame alive. You chuckle. She's the sibling who shows up to every reunion, stirs the soup, and never starts an argument. Someone hands you a cup of warm wine, spiced faintly with honey. You sip, the sweetness coating your tongue, the warmth sliding down like liquid fire. The room hums with soft voices, the crackle of logs, the clink of pottery. Outside, crickets sing. You stretch out on a mat, the firelight painting orange across your eyelids. The world narrows to the steady pop of wood, the faint hum of voices, and the glow that has bound families together for centuries. The hearth, the heart, Hestia's quiet gift. As your eyes droop, you think, no epic battles tonight, no tragic heroes, just firelight, soup, and the gentle pulse of a goddess who never left home. And somehow, that feels like exactly the story you need to fall asleep. The orange glow of the Greek hearth fades, and now the world tilts towards salt air and restless tides. You're on a sandy beach where the wind smells of cloves and seaweed, the horizon painted silver by moonlight. Before you, tall masts creak as Swahili dhows rock gently on the swell, sails furled, ropes humming like low strings in the breeze. Lanterns swing from the sterns, their flames flickering with each gust, tiny beacons in the night. You step onto the worn planks of a dhow. The deck feels alive, rising and falling with the swell. Sailors in white robes move with steady grace, checking knots, stowing gear, adjusting lines. Their indigo sashes whip in the wind, their voices low and measured. You hear them murmur prayers as they glance skyward, watching the stars that dictate their journey. For centuries, these sailors rode the monsoon winds, timing their voyages between Africa, Arabia, and India. The sea is restless tonight. Waves slap against the hull, steady but insistent. A mast groans, ropes taut like bowstrings. You steady yourself, gripping a wooden rail polished smooth by countless hands. The wood is cool under your fingers, damp with salt spray. The night air clings to your skin, thick with moisture and a faint spice. The smell of cloves packed below deck, bound for a market far to the north. One sailor grins at you, teeth flashing in the lantern glow, and tells you a tale. He claims the monsoon winds are alive, whispering to those who listen. Sometimes they are kind, carrying ships swiftly. Other times they turn, cruel and sharp, scattering fleets like toys. Historians still argue how precise Swahili sailors' knowledge of these winds was compared to their Indian Ocean neighbors. But you can see their confidence, eyes fixed on stars, hands steady on ropes, hearts tuned to the rhythm of the sea. A boy scrambles up the mast, nimble as a cat, tying knots with bare feet, gripping the wood. He whistles as he works, a tune lost in the wind. Below, an older sailor shakes his head, muttering that youth always forgets to double-check. You smile. Some complaints echo across all generations, whether in desert caravans or on the sea. The dhow heaves forward as the tide shifts. Lantern light catches the carved prow, shaped like a bird stretching into flight. You run your fingers along it, tracing grooves worn by years of journeys. The wood smells faintly of resin. Somewhere below deck, a goat bleats miserably, clearly unimpressed with maritime trade. You chuckle, poor creature didn't sign up for globalization. The sailors share roasted fish, pulled fresh from the sea hours before. They tear pieces with their hands, pass them along with dried dates. One offers you a hunk. The fish is smoky, rich with salt, and the sweetness of the date balances it perfectly. You chew slowly, feeling both sustained and lulled, as if the ocean itself were feeding you. The stars wheel above. Orion straddles the sky, Sirius blazing. The sailors point out the Southern Cross, tracing lines with their fingers. One recites their names in a sing-song voice, like a bedtime story for the sea. You tilt your head back, dizzy with the sheer number of lights. The world feels impossibly vast, yet here you are on a wooden vessel, bobbing calmly through it. The wind picks up, sails unfurl with a snap, and suddenly the dhow leans into motion. The ropes sing, the planks groan, the sea sprays your face with cold droplets. The sailors laugh not nervously, but joyfully, as if the ocean were an old companion finally waking up. Your heart stutters, then steadies, lulled by the steady push forward. One elder sailor tells another tale, this one about a sea spirit with green eyes and hair like kelp, who rides the waves when storms rage. He insists he saw her once near Zanzibar, guiding their dhow to safety. Another man scoffs, says it was probably just phosphorescent plankton. Historians still debate whether such tales hide memories of real events, storms, glowing seas, or if they are simply stories to pass the time. Either way, you find them oddly comforting. The night deepens, the dhow slices through dark water, its lanterns glowing softly, casting golden halos on the waves. The wind hums, the ropes creak, the wood sighs, and you feel as though the sea itself is rocking you toward sleep. You lie back against a coil of rope, the stars blurring above, the taste of salt still on your lips. The dhow glides on, lanterns swaying, sails straining, sailors humming under their breath. And you, drifting with them, surrender to the lullaby of monsoon winds in the endless patient sea. The hiss of the sea fades, and when you open your eyes, you're no longer on a dhow. Instead, you're in a cramped Victorian bedroom with heavy curtains pulled shut against the dawn. The wallpaper is patterned with roses that have long since faded to beige. A coal fire pops weakly in the grate, and on the bedside table sits a clutter of bottles, powders, and pamphlets remedies for sleeplessness, each more peculiar than the last. You sit down on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging beneath you, and leaf through a pamphlet titled Surefire Cures for the Restless Mind. One recommends a warm glass of milk, which seems harmless enough. Another suggests soaking socks in vinegar before sleep. You wrinkle your nose, clearly not a recipe for romance. Yet these were real prescriptions, born of a time when science and superstition cohabited like mismatched roommates. The air smells faintly of camphor, lavender oil, and something more medicinal chloral hydrate, perhaps. The fashionable sleeping draught of the 19th century. You lift a brown glass bottle and swirl it. The liquid glugs thickly, and you shiver. Some called it a miracle cure. Others warned it was poison in disguise. Historians still argue whether the Victorians overestimated its safety or simply ignored the risks in pursuit of a good night's rest. On the dresser sits a curious contraption, a bedtime inhaler that puffs warm air scented with valerian root. You lean close, sniff, and gag. Slightly, it smells like a mix of damp socks and old celery. You laugh softly to yourself. Perhaps sleeplessness was better than subjecting your nose to that. The occupant of this roomlet's, imagine him, shuffles back in, a middle-aged clerk with ink-stained fingers and bags under his eyes. He mutters about ledgers and deadlines, then stirs together a concoction of lettuce water, sugar, and a pinch of nutmeg. Yes, lettuce water. Victorians swore by it. You sip in sympathy, but it tastes like boiled garden trimmings. He then rubs his temples with soothing balm sold by a traveling salesman. It burns slightly, leaving his forehead shiny. He sighs anyway, convinced it will help. You shake your head placebo, but at least it feels reassuring. You almost envy that kind of faith. The room is thick with silence, broken only by the tick of a brass clock on the mantel. Its pendulum swings steadily, hypnotic. You follow it with your eyes, back and forth, your own breath slowing to match. Hypnotists were, in fact, another Victorian fad. Doctors debated whether the trance was a real cure or just suggestive fancy. You wonder if staring at the clock long enough might not work the same way. Beside the bed, a journal lies open. Scrawled handwriting fills the pages. Accounts of sleepless nights, endless counting of sheep, remedies tried and failed. One entry reads, tried warm port wine mixed with cinnamon. Slept 4 hours, woke with headache. Will try again. Another says simply, dreamed of work, no escape, even in sleep. You sigh, realizing that some problems never change. The clerk finally lies down, pulling a heavy quilt to his chin. He swallows a spoonful of syrup made from poppy extract, grimacing at the bitterness. His eyes close slowly, whether it's the syrup, the vinegar socks, or sheer exhaustion. You can't be sure, but eventually, his breathing evens. The fire flickers low, shadows creep across the wallpaper, and the room softens into hush. You imagine yourself sinking into that same bed. The mattress is lumpy, the sheets rough, but there's a comfort in the weight of the quilt and the muffled world beyond the curtains. The fire's glow flickers on your eyelids, painting them orange. You hear the faintest city sounds, shoof beats clopping in the street, a carriage rattling past, the distant call of a watchman. Yet here, inside, the room feels cocooned. On the nightstand, a half-finished remedy waits, a glass of warm milk laced with honey. You take a sip. It's sweet, bland, almost childish, but it soothes your throat. You stretch, pull the quilt higher, and feel the weight of Victorian fatigue pressing down. Historians still puzzle over why insomnia became such an obsession in this era. Was it the gaslights keeping cities awake? The stress of industrial schedules? Or just the Victorians' fondness for cataloging every minor misery? Whatever the cause, the cures they dreamed up now seem quaint, sometimes comical. And yet, you understand their yearning. The simple wish for sleep has always been universal. Your eyelids sag, the tick of the clock lulls you, the fire sighs, and the room folds around you like an old quilt. Remedies or not, sleep comes at last, creeping in as silently as the soot drifting down the chimney. The coal fire fades, and when you open your eyes again, you're not in a bedroom at all. Instead, you're seated cross-legged inside a wide silk tent, its fabric glowing faintly under lamplight. Outside, you hear the shuffle of camels, the distant clatter of hooves, the muffled bargaining of a caravan camp. But in here, the air smells of parchment and spice. You've joined Sogdian merchants, those middlemen of the silk routes, who are busy recording every bale, every coin, every rumor of trade. The lamp before you flickers. Its glass chimney is smudged, its oil smoky, but its glow is steady enough to illuminate the spread of scrolls and ledgers across a low wooden table. Ink stains blot the parchment, black like spilled shadows. A clerk dips his reed pen, scratches briskly, pauses to count lumps of something wrapped in cloth. He mutters under his breath silk bolts, saffron bundles, jade amulets. The numbers march across the page like tired soldiers. A merchant leans back against a pile of cushions, tugging his robe closer around his shoulders. His beard smells faintly of cardamom. His fingers glitter with rings from halfway across Asia. He smiles at you, pours tea into a small cup, and pushes it toward you. It's hot, bitter, earthy, strong enough to keep eyes open on long nights. You sip, and it steadies you, even if it tastes like boiled twigs. The tent flaps stir as another man ducks inside, his turban loosened, his face dusty from the road. He drops a small sack with the thump peppercorns from India, he says. The others lean forward, inhaling the sharp, pungent scent. Someone jokes that pepper is worth more than gold in certain towns. Another counters that pepper only makes you sneeze and lose half your profit. Laughter ripples through the tent. You chuckle too. Global trade has always run on equal parts greed and humor. A boy scurries in with a tray of dried apricots and nuts. You grab one, the sweetness sticking to your teeth. Outside, you hear a camel groan as if offended by the lack of apricot rations. The men ignore it, too busy tallying. They argue softly over exchange rates. Historians still argue whether Sogdian merchants standardized prices or thrived on clever manipulation. Judging by the sly smiles around the table, you suspect the latter. One merchant produces a piece of silk, letting it unfurl across the cushions. The lamplight dances on it, shimmering red and gold, so fine you can see your fingers through it. You stroke it gently, marveling at its smoothness. A man nods proudly, saying it came all the way from China. Another shakes his head, muttering that local weavers could mimic the pattern just as well. A small debate sparks authentic versus imitation, and you realize people have been arguing about knockoffs for millennia. The lamp sputters. Shadows leap along the tent walls, stretching the merchants' faces into masks. One man tells of a caravan ambushed by bandits in the mountains, rescued only because the bandits wanted the silk but not the ledgers. He laughs, waving his hand as though to say, "See? Paperwork survives everything." Another man claims he once bribed a customs officer with a basket of grapes rather than pay a tax in coin. The others scoff, though secretly they admire the cunning. You lean back, the cushions sinking beneath you. The air is thick with smoke, spice, and the faint smell of wool. The scratching of quills continues. Outside, the night is alive with faint noises. The soft grunt of camels shifting, the distant call of a night guard, the murmur of wind through desert grass. One merchant, older and more solemn, raises his cup. He says quietly that trade is more than goods, it's stories, ideas, even jokes. Without merchants, the world would never meet itself. Historians still debate whether Sogdians spread religion intentionally or just carried it along with goods. But as you sip tea, lulled by his voice, you feel the truth in it. Trade is not only silk and salt, but the invisible threads binding cultures together. The ledger closes with a soft snap. Ink dries on the parchment, glowing faintly in the lamplight. The merchants stretch, yawn, settle deeper into their cushions. One snores almost instantly. Another mutters about profit margins even in his sleep. You smile. Some things never change. The lamp guttering low, You lie back, staring at the tent roof. Its fabric glows faintly orange, rippling with the fire outside. The hum of the camp seeps in, camels sighing, guards murmuring, the desert breathing. And you, lulled by ink, spice, and trade, drift as quietly as the caravans themselves. The lamplight of the Sogdian tent dims, and when you blink again, you are surrounded not by ledgers, but by steam. Thick clouds drift across polished wood, carrying the scent of cedar and hot water. You're in an Edo period bathhouse, where the air hums with warmth and quiet conversation. The hiss of water, the shuffle of bare feet on wet floors, the clatter of buckets all of it folds into a rhythm both soothing and strangely timeless. You step into the changing area. Wooden cubbies hold neatly folded kimonos, and straw sandals line the floor like obedient soldiers. A polite attendant bows slightly, though he barely glances at you. He's seen thousands come and go. You fumble with your robe, slide it off, and clutch a tiny towel, the kind so small it's laughable. You grin. Apparently modesty was a flexible concept in Edo, Japan. The bathing hall opens before you. Pools of steaming water gleam under lantern light, and shadows of bathers ripple across wooden walls. Some sit quietly, their heads tilted back, steam curling around their faces. Others scrub themselves with soap root, splashing water in cheerful slaps. Buckets clatter as men pour hot water over shoulders, sighing in unison. The sound is like a chorus of relief. You ease yourself into one of the pools. The water is hot, shockingly so at first, prickling your skin, then slowly soothing, seeping into your bones. You sink deeper, your shoulders disappearing, your breath slowing. The heat loosens every muscle, every thought. Around you, men chat lazily about rice harvests, kabuki plays, or the weather's stubborn refusal to behave. One man jokes that if the shogun had a decent bath every night, politics would be calmer. Everyone laughs softly, their voices echoing against wood and steam. You notice the bathhouse itself. Cedar beams glisten with condensation, floors darkened with water, lanterns glowing like moons through fog. A mural on the far wall shows Mount Fuji, painted in blue and white. The mountain looms serenely, as if reminding bathers that Japan itself watches over them while they soak. You imagine future bathhouses still carrying similar murals, a thread across centuries. Near you, an elderly man hums an old folk tune. His voice is cracked, yet steady. A younger man joins in, clapping the rhythm on the side of the pool. Soon, a small chorus forms, their voices blending with the hiss of water. You chuckle, it feels like a concert for steam and echoes. Bathhouses weren't just about cleanliness, they were social centers. Deals were made here, gossip traded, even small romances sparked. Historians still argue whether Edo bathhouses were more about hygiene or community. But as you soak, feeling the quiet camaraderie of strangers who don't bother with names, you suspect the latter. A boy rushes past with a tray of wooden cups filled with sweet amazaki, a warm, slightly alcoholic rice drink. You take one, sip it slowly. The taste is faintly sweet, milky, comforting. It lingers on your tongue like the memory of rice pudding. Paired with the steam, it makes you drowsy in the best way. In one corner, a man pours cold water over himself from a bucket, gasping loudly, then laughing at his own shock. Others tease him, insisting it builds character. You wonder if that excuse still works in modern gyms. The hours slip quietly. Steam rises in soft plumes, fogging your hair. Your skin glows, Your limbs feel like melted wax. You lean your head against the edge of the pool, eyes half closed. The bathhouse hums with small sounds, buckets clinking, voices murmuring, the occasional cough. It is not noisy, not silent, but perfectly balanced between. One man tells a story, voice low. He claims a fox spirit once visited a bathhouse disguised as a beautiful woman, only for her tail to appear in the steam. Some nod, others laugh. One insists he saw such a thing himself. Historians still debate whether fox legends originated as moral tales or just excuses for odd behavior. You decide it's best not to test them tonight. The steam thickens, wrapping you like a blanket. Your skin prickles, your breath slows. You close your eyes, hearing the soft drip of water from the rafters. The mural of Mount Fuji fades behind your lids. The voices blur into hums, and the bath becomes a cradle. You drift, buoyed by heat and steam, into the drowsy embrace of an Edo night. The steam dissolves, and when you open your eyes again, you're back under stars. This time, you're not rocking on a dhow or curled by a hearth. You're seated cross-legged on coarse desert mats, a steaming kettle between you. The air is cold and dry, sharper than glass, the kind of chill that sneaks through layers of cloth. You're in a Tuareg encampment, where the tea never stops flowing and the debates stretch as long as the desert horizon. A man in an indigo veil leans forward, pouring the first round. The liquid streams high from the pot into a tiny glass, frothing at the top before settling into amber calm. He passes it to you, nodding solemnly. You sip its bitter, bracing, strong enough to wake a camel. He chuckles knowingly. Around you, others hold their glasses carefully, warming their hands in the glow. The desert is quiet except for the fire's crackle and the restless sigh of camels shifting nearby. Sparks leap upward, colliding with stars. Someone begins to speak, his voice low and deliberate. He talks about the routes across the Sahara, how some paths cut shorter, but risk bandits, while others wander wide yet promise safety. His neighbor interrupts, insisting the stars themselves dictate the best path. Another laughs, pointing out that stars don't warn you of sandstorms. The conversation turns into a slow volley, each man convinced he has the desert memorized better than the next. You lean back, glass in hand, amused. It feels less like an argument and more like a lullaby. The cadence of voices, the rhythm of pauses, the way laughter punctuates serious talk. Historians still argue whether Tuareg navigation relied more on memorized star maps or oral storytelling, but you realize the truth may be both. Knowledge here is carried in voices as much as in constellations. The second round of tea arrives sweeter, thicker, frothier. One man declares it is as strong as love. Another teases that his wife would disagree. Laughter ripples, carried into the night. You sip, and the sugar coats your tongue, softening the desert's bite. The warmth pools in your belly. A boy pokes at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing. His father tells him not to waste wood, each piece precious in a land where trees are rare. The boy sighs dramatically, then hides a grin. Even in the Sahara, children find ways to rebel. You chuckle softly, remembering the Victorian boy you met earlier, trading spoons for cowries. History is full of tired fathers and cheeky sons. The tea flows into a third glass. This one, they say, is sweet as death. The men drink it slowly, savoring. You find it cloying but oddly soothing, the kind of sweetness that quiets the mind. A hush falls as the fire burns lower. The debate shifts, now about survival. Which wells still hold water? Which routes are fading? One man insists a well near Tamanrasset has dried forever. Another swears he drank from it last month. Voices rise slightly, then fall again, like waves lapping sand. The stars above are mercilessly bright. You tilt your head back, dizzy with their sheer number. Orion rises, his belt glittering. The Milky Way arches like spilled salt. The men point out constellations you don't recognize, each with names foreign yet soothing. A guide explains how they string them together into invisible maps. He says the desert has no roads, but countless signposts if you know how to look. You nod, feeling both lost and safe at once. One elder tells a story of a caravan that ignored the stars and lost its way for weeks, only to be guided back by the laughter of jinn spirits. Some believe the tale, others shake their heads. Historians still debate whether such jinn stories masked real survival accounts or simply entertained sleepless nights. Either way, you find the thought oddly comforting that even spirits might giggle their way across the dunes. The fire sinks to embers. The men pull their veils tighter, murmuring blessings before stretching out on mats. Camels groan one last protest, then fold themselves into sleep. The desert hush deepens, vast and endless. You cradle the last of your tea, lukewarm now, sweet on your tongue. Your body feels heavy. Your eyelids droop. The debates fade into murmurs, then into silence. The desert breathes, slow and steady, and you breathe with it, sinking into the rhythm of Tuareg night. The embers dim, the desert hush folds away, and when your eyes open again, you're surrounded by water once more, but not the restless sea. This is a place of calm canals and floating gardens, under a moon that turns the water silver. You're drifting through the chinampas of the Mexica, what later generations will call the Aztecs, where crops grow on islands woven from reeds, mud, and ingenuity. Your canoe glides silently, the paddle dipping in and out of water with a soft plop. The air smells faintly of wet earth, lilies, and maize. Around you, narrow strips of land rise from the canals, their edges braced with willow roots. On them grow maize, beans, chilies, squash rows, so straight they look painted. You run your fingers across a leaf as you pass, dew clinging like glass beads. A heron lifts from the water, its wings whispering. Ducks paddle lazily, unbothered by your presence. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then curls back into sleep. The night here is not silent, but symphonic water birds calling, frogs croaking, crickets thrumming. You breathe it in, lulled by the chorus. The chinampas are alive with more than plants. A farmer in a cotton cloak kneels, pressing mud into place with his bare hands. His face glows faintly in torchlight. He hums as he works, steady, unhurried. Another rows past with baskets of tomatoes piled high, their skins gleaming like tiny lanterns. He greets you with a nod before disappearing down a canal that curves like a dark ribbon. Historians still argue whether chinampas were first invented by the Mexica themselves or inherited from earlier cultures around the lakes. But floating here, it feels timeless, like the land and water simply agreed one day to cooperate. The canals stretch in perfect grids, an aquatic city feeding hundreds of thousands, silently, steadily. You reach for a gourd handed to you by a passing boy. It holds pulque, a fermented drink from agave. You take a sip, it's milky, faintly sour, earthy, like drinking the flavor of a rain-soaked field. You grimace lightly, then smile. Acquired tastes are the most honest ones. The moonlight catches flowers blooming on the chinampas, marigolds bright as embers, morning glories curling even in the night. Their colors blur with the reflections in the water, so that the canals look like threads embroidered with fire. A woman tends them quietly, clipping stems to offer later at a shrine. She doesn't look up, her hands moving with the same rhythm as her breath. A fisherman poles past, nets folded in his canoe. He whispers that spirits live in these waters. Some are helpful, guiding lost boats, others mischievous, tugging at nets. He claims he once saw a glowing figure walk across the canal's surface. Another man nearby snorts, saying he'd drunk too much pulque. Historians still debate whether such tales were allegories or just tired fishermen exaggerating. You smile, thinking either explanation is equally charming. You lie back in your canoe, staring upward. The stars are reflected in the canal, so that you float between two skies, one above, one below. The sensation is dizzying, as if you've slipped into another world. Your paddle rests across your lap, dripping softly. You hear the faint slap of water against reeds, steady as a heartbeat. In the distance, drums thud faintly, a festival still echoing in the city of Tenochtitlan. The sound is softened by water, more lullaby than celebration. You imagine dancers in feathered headdresses twirling, priests chanting, families laughing, while here on the canals the world remains hushed. You close your eyes, and the canoe rocks gently, cradling you. The frogs croak on, the crickets hum, the water licks the sides of the boat. Your body grows heavy, your mind light. The chinampas drift past, fields floating on dreams, as steady and quiet as the night itself. The canals and floating gardens recede, and cool air brushes your face thin, crisp, and edged with altitude. You are high in the Andes now, where the mountains stack like folded blankets, and the morning sun pours through as if wrung from gold cloth. Below you, terraces, curved and stepped, holding pockets of green in a stone world. You can smell damp soil warming, and something sweet riding the breeze. You follow your nose, always a solid research method, at breakfast time, and find an Inca orchard tucked into a slope like a secret. You step between low stone walls into rows of fruiting trees and vines. Leaves glitter with dew. Birds fuss in the branches the way accountants fuss in ledgers. A farmer waves you over, presses a lumpy, green-skinned fruit into your hands. Chirimoya, he says, eyes bright. You split it to reveal pale flesh, soft as custard. The scent is vanilla and meadow. The taste, halfway between pear and daydream. You scoop a bit with your thumb, and the sweetness settles you like a lullaby. Somewhere, a child calls out that the visitor is eating the ice cream fruit, with no spoons scandalous. You wander on. A grove of lucuma trees shades a path, their fruits matte and ochre, like little suns that forgot to glow. You try a slice. It's dense, a little dry, but with a caramel whisper that sneaks in after a beat, the way a joke lands in a quiet room. You imagine it mashed into desserts, turning milk to velvet. A woman nods, as if reading your mind. Later, she says, they'll mix it with honey for a festival sweet. To your left, vines dangle long, yellow podstumbo, the banana passion fruit. You crack one, tangy pulp slides free, studded with crunchy seeds, a gentle wake-up for your tongue. Higher up, an arching tree bends with paper lantern husks of aguaymanto, goldenberry. You pop one, tart and bright, like a sunrise that skipped its coffee. The farmers grin at your puckered face. You're collecting flavors the way the Sogdian merchants collected rumors, one careful handful at a time. The terraces here are not random artistry. They are instruments tuned to climate. Stones hold heat. Soils vary by design. Moisture is guided as politely as a guest of honor. Historians still argue whether places like Moriah, set of concentric agricultural terraces, not far from here, were a true experimental station for testing crops across microclimates or primarily ceremonial with bonus planting space. As you stand in a bowl of warm air, while a gust of chill brushes your shoulders from 2 steps above, you suspect the answer might be both, and also clever. A farmer shows you storage pits and small coal castor houses that nurse cool, dry breezes through slatted walls. He places baskets of fruit inside as calmly as a librarian shelving favorites. The Inca were famous for logistics. When armies needed food, the empire fed them. When harvests faltered, storehouses opened. That's your mainstream fact for the night, filed neatly between stars for navigation, and vinegar socks are not a universal cure. A boy with a sling circles the orchard, whistling and snapping stones toward the sky. Not at you, good news, but at pushy birds. His aim is wickedly good. He claims to have pelted a condor once. He did not. And the farmers roll their eyes. They did. In a far corner, someone has strung dried gourds that clack together when the wind shifts. A clattery scarecrow that sounds like a polite argument. It works just enough to keep the laziest birds honest. You kneel and let soil crumble through your fingers. It's darker than you expect. The farmer tells you they mix in decayed plant matter, llama droppings, and occasionally ash from sacred fires. He winks, adding that a blessing never hurts a bean. You can't disagree. The rows are straight as sutures. The irrigation cuts clean. Water trickles with the sound so steady that your heart begins to pace itself to the flow. He hands you a long green pod piquet, the ice cream bean. You split it along its seam. Inside are cottony white cushions wrapped around glossy seeds. You taste the fluff. It is faintly sweet, like marshmallow that read a health pamphlet and decided to behave. You grin, and the farmer nods in satisfaction. Somewhere behind you, an elderly woman laughs softly and says the mountains always hide candy for patient walkers. Wind climbs the terraces and slides across your cheeks. Far above, snow sighs on the peaks. Far below, the valley flickers with fields like chessboards. You hear a flute, soft and far. Its notes coil down the slope, threading the orchard, nudging leaf and fruit and you. An old man appears, the flute still at his lips, eyes bright with the sheen of someone who has seen an empire held together by footsteps and stones. He pauses, lowers the instrument, and tells a story. Once, he says, the Luxma was a gift from a mountain spirit to a lonely shepherd. Another swears it was dropped by a condor that stole sweets from the sun. Some nod, some scoff. Historians still argue whether such tales are late embroidery or echoes of older myths. You decide the shepherd deserves the candy either way. Midday warms and softens. You sit under a tree, back to bark, and bite into another chirimoya. A sticky drop escapes down your wrist. An obliging dog cleans it off with scholarly dedication. You thank him. He wags, clearly a specialist in applied fruit sciences. Your eyelids grow heavy, but the orchard is not asleep. Bees fuss, leaves gossip. A wooden rake scrapes rhythmically. The scrape, scrape, scrape becomes a metronome your thoughts can't outrun. A woman shows you a woven pouch of seeds beans mottled like tiny galaxies, maize kernels in every shade from bone to garnet to night. She says they trade varieties from valley to valley. Be a Sogdian for a minute, you joke, and she laughs, tipping a few into your palm. Diversity is insurance, she explains. If one terrace sulks, another smiles. Even empires need backup plans. There is a fringe rumor you overhear, whispered between two farmers. They claim a traveler tasted a fruit that made him dream of golden cities and wake speaking a mountain dialect he didn't know. Another shakes his head. More likely, he ate unripe tumbo. You tuck the tale beside gin laughter and fox spirits in bathhouse steam stories, whose truth may be less important than their company. By late afternoon, the shade lengthens and cool descends bead by bead. Workers carry baskets toward the storehouses, steps sure, voices low. Someone calls for a last sweep, for dropped fruit waste is for people with smaller mountains. You help pick up a fallen aguemanto, brush the husk, and set it in a basket. Small helps count here, like stones in a wall. The flute returns, a few notes like birds settling. The dog sighs, circles thrice, and collapses in serious pursuit of a nap. You stretch your legs, let your head tip back, and watch a cloud unspool itself over a peak. Remember the Edo bath, where steam blurred Mount Fuji. The Andes do the same trick with sky. Remember the Tuareg tea, 3 rounds from bitter to sweet? These terraces taste like that arc acidity, to richness to calm. Even the vinegar socks feel far away now, which is frankly where vinegar socks belong. Evening finds you drowsy. The orchard breathes out a cool sweetness, crushed leaves, damp earth, fruit skins giving up their perfume. A bell tinks somewhere down the slope. A llama lifts its head, decides against ambition, and resumes thinking about nothing. You close your eyes. In the dark behind your lids, terraces ripple like quiet waves, and fruits, custard caramel, citrus drift by like small moons. The breeze slows. Your breath follows. Above, first stars prick the blue, and below, a worker's lamp clicks to life a tiny hearth for Hestia's distant cousin, keeping watch among the trees. You curl deeper into your borrowed poncho, heavier than quilts, lighter than sleep, and let the orchard hold you the way stone holds sun, gently, completely, and for as long as the night asks. The orchard's cool breath slips away, and when your eyes flutter open, you are not in terraces anymore. Instead, you sit in the hush of a stone chamber, the air tinged with beeswax and ink. It is midnight in a medieval monastery, and monks are bent over wooden desks, their quills whispering across parchment. The only light comes from stubby candles, their flames trembling against walls painted with shadows. You shuffle forward quietly, your sandals tapping faintly on the worn flagstones. The room is lined with shelves of manuscripts, thick volumes bound in leather, some chained to the desks. The monks murmur softly to themselves, half prayers, half dictations, as they copy. A page rustles, a candle pops. The chamber breathes in rhythm with their scratching quills. You slide onto a bench beside a scribe. His face is gaunt, his tonsure ring gleaming faintly. He dips his quill into ink, shakes off a drop, and bends again to his page. His letters are neat, curling with flourishes. He pauses only to sharpen the quill with a small knife, each motion precise. You watch his concentration and wonder how anyone can keep their eyes open this late without a Victorian syrup of poppy extract. On the desk nearby lies an illumination in progress, a border of vines twined with tiny birds, a golden initial glowing like sunrise. You lean closer, dazzled by the tiny detail. The monk clears his throat, not unkindly, reminding you not to smudge centuries of work. You nod, chastened, and sit straighter. The midnight bell tolls faintly in the distance. It is time for prayers, but not all leave their desks. Some continue copying. God's work takes precedence, even over God's clock. One monk mutters that deadlines are holy too. You grin softly. Clearly, deadlines were invented long before email. From another desk, a young novice yawns so wide you fear his jaw might unhinge. He blinks furiously, nearly blotting his line with ink. His elder taps the table, muttering, "Awake, lad," before handing him a fig to chew. The sugar perks him up slightly. You wonder if monks ever traded notes on insomnia, remedies with their Victorian descendants. Lettuce water here, vinegar socks there, everyone fighting the same enemy of sleepless nights. The room fills with small sounds, scratching, muttering, the hiss of wax dripping. One monk coughs, another sneezes and nearly topples his inkpot, saved at the last second by his neighbor's quick hand. They exchange a brief glare, then smirk, then return to work. Even sanctity allows for annoyance. Historians still argue whether monasteries copied texts purely to preserve scripture, or whether they knew they were archiving entire civilizations, Greek philosophers, Roman law, even the odd herbal remedy. Judging by the weary faces around you, the monks might simply say, someone had to do it. And so, line by line, history survived. In the corner, a monk chants quietly as he copies, each syllable guiding his quill. His voice is low, soothing, almost like the drone of bees. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sound wash over you. It blends with the scratch of pens, the pop of candles, the faint toll of another bell. You feel your pulse slowing, matching the rhythm. A novice sidles up with a tray of warm ale. He pours small cups for the scribes, who sip gratefully. You lift one tumbled, frothy, a touch of sweetness. It warms your throat, steadying your breath. You sigh in contentment, understanding why monks brewed. Not everything was for piety. Some things were just to make the nights tolerable. The candles burn lower, dripping onto iron holders. Wax pools like tiny lakes on the desks. The air smells faintly of smoke, parchment, and tired men. One monk hums a hymn under his breath. Another stretches his stiff back, bones cracking audibly. You sympathize long hours at a desk are timeless pains. A whispered tale spreads between two monks. Of a manuscript said to glow faintly when read aloud at midnight, its letters traced with divine fire. Some scoff, others cross themselves. Historians still argue whether such stories were invented to keep novices from napping. You smile. It's a clever tactic either way. Eventually, the abbot enters. He surveys the room, nods once, and snuffs a candle. One by one, the monks close their books, blot their pages, and set aside quills. The chamber exhales. You watch them file out, their robes swishing softly, their sandals echoing. You remain seated for a moment longer. The room is nearly dark now, the last candle sputtering. The silence is deep, almost tangible. You rest your head against the desk, feeling the cool wood beneath your cheek. Quills, ink, wax, and whispered prayers swirl together, wrapping you in a cocoon of midnight calm. And so, with monks still scratching faintly in your memory, you drift into sleep as soft as vellum. The candlelight gutters, and when you stir again, you're no longer among monks and manuscripts. Instead, the air is thick with salt, drums, and dawn. You stand on the ramparts of a Swahili stone fort, its coral walls glowing pink as the first light spills across the Indian Ocean. Below, waves slap the rocks with a steady rhythm, and the cries of gulls tangle with the murmur of early prayers drifting from a mosque nearby. You lean on the cool stone wall. It is pitted, rough, smelling faintly of lime and seaweed. Soldiers shuffle past, their sandals scraping, their spears clinking softly. Some yawned on watch was never glamorous. Their captain mutters about trade winds and Portuguese ships, then points at the horizon, where sails glimmer faintly like teeth. You squint, but all you see is endless water turning gold. Behind you, the town stirs. Merchants set out baskets of cloves and ivory carvings. Women in bright kangas sweep courtyards, their brooms scratching the packed earth. A fisherman pushes off in a dugout canoe, nets coiled like sleeping snakes. The smell of frying cassava wafts through the alleys, sharp and comforting at once. You inhale deeply, your stomach rumbling softly in protest. A drum sounds slow, resonant. It echoes against the stone walls, calling the town to life. Another drum joins, higher, quicker, a conversation in rhythm. You tap your foot unconsciously, lulled by the beat. The soldiers grin. Even discipline bends to music here. One guard leans against the wall and tells you a story of a Portuguese cannonball lodged in the fort's foundation, never removed. He claims you can still hear it rattle when the sea is rough. Another scoffs, saying it's just the wind. Historians still debate how often these forts fell to European cannons, or how often the stories grew taller with each retelling. You smile, deciding the rattle is more interesting than the silence. The sea brightens. A dhow glides into view, its triangular sail catching the wind like a bird's wing. Children run along the quay, shouting greetings. The sailors wave back, laughing. The town hums louder traders, hurrying toward the docks, clerks clutching ledgers, porters ready to haul cargo into storerooms. The day begins with the tide. Yet here on the rampart, time feels slower. The fort breathes with stone lungs, steady and immovable. Cannons squat in rows, their muzzles black, their iron cold under your palm. Moss clings to their bases, and a small lizard darts across the barrel, utterly unimpressed with history. You chuckle softly. Even lizards survive empires. The drums fade, replaced by the muezzin's call, long and melodic. It rolls over the town, mingling with gulls and surf. You close your eyes, letting it wash through you, the sound both earthly and transcendent. For a moment, everything Fort Town feels held in balance, fragile and eternal at once. You wander down from the walls, through arched gates, into narrow streets. Stone houses line either side, their carved wooden doors heavy with brass studs. Some say the studs once deflected war elephants, though here they serve more as decoration. You run your fingers across one, the wood smooth with centuries of touch. Inside, courtyards bloom with jasmine and papaya trees, their fragrance spilling into the alley. A merchant invites you into his home. He offers spiced coffee thick, dark, with a bite of cardamom. You sip, the warmth blooming in your chest. He talks of trade, gold from inland, ivory carved into bangles, slaves taken and sold. His voice drops here, uneasy. He turns quickly to pepper prices, as if even in history some truths are best handled with care. You nod, listening, absorbing, letting the bitterness of the coffee soften what the words cannot. Outside, the fort looms again, Guardian of the coast, children play in its shadow, their laughter bouncing off coral walls. Women spread cloth dyed with red and black patterns, the colors glowing under the rising sun. Men mend nets, the threads glinting like silver in the light. Life flows on, steady as the tide. The captain climbs back onto the ramparts. He shades his eyes, watching the horizon. The sails he warned of never appear. He shrugs, calls for breakfast, and the men laugh in relief. The sea keeps its secrets for another day. You sit on the seawall, toes dangling, listening to the hush of waves against stone. The fort behind you stands immovable, but the world it guards is fluid, humming, alive. You feel the rhythm of drums still echoing in your chest, softened now to a heartbeat. The sun climbs higher. The day begins in earnest. And you, weary traveler of boring histories, settle into the comfort of stone, sea, and dawn's steady breath. Now the journey slows. You've crossed deserts and canals, markets and monasteries, orchards and oceans. Each place hummed with its own rhythm tea, poured high into glasses, quills scratching across parchment, bathhouse water sighing, salt caravans trudging under stars. And yet, through it all, the cadence remained the same, steady, unhurried, a heartbeat to lull you into calm. Picture yourself now lying back, no longer moving, no longer drifting. The fire's reduced to coals, the lantern to a faint glow, the sea to a whisper against the shore. You feel the weight of quilts, cloaks, or ponchos. You choose which, settling over you like centuries themselves, heavy but protective. The air cools, carrying the scents of wood smoke, salt, or earth. The world narrows to the sound of your own breath. Each detail you recall, cowrie shells clinking, buffalo waiting, monks yawning, merchants tallying, becomes fainter, softened, blurred. They fade as naturally as dusk fades into night. Even the arguments about gin spirits, star maps, or vinegar socks lose their edges, becoming gentle murmurs that dissolve into quiet. The stars above remain, always the stars, guides for Tuareg caravans, sailors, farmers, and you. They shine steadily, calmly, never hurried. Let them hold you now. Imagine them stretching across your ceiling, spilling their soft light through your eyelids. Imagine their rhythm slowing your heartbeat, drawing you deeper into rest. And as the last images fade, the fort, the orchard, the bathhouse, the monastery, you realize they are not gone. They linger, waiting, stored like manuscripts in a quiet library, ready to be opened when needed. But not tonight. Tonight, they close with you. So breathe softly. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the long, boring history for sleep do its final task, to cradle you gently into the silence of dreams.